call this meeting to order. Would you like to do roll call?
Mr. Bant?
Here.
Mr. Chu?
Here.
Ms. Headland?
Here.
Mr. Lewis? Ms. Mikovsky?
Here.
Ms. Salmon?
Here.
Ms. Waller?
Is at the door.
All right. And Ms. Winkelmeis?
Here.
And we do have a quorum.
Okay, are there any changes to the agenda?
I would just like to mention that because of the Boneyard Creek Improvements public meeting that starts at 6 tonight, we'll be trying to adjourn this meeting as close to 5:30 as possible to give everyone time to get over there who's going.
Okay, next I'm asking for approval of minutes of the previous meeting.
So moved.
Okay, can I have a second? Okay. We have no public input today, so we'll go ahead to communications and have the presentation of the monthly progress report.
Thanks. Just some updates on our current projects. As far as Boneyard Creek Public Art, we'll be speaking about that at our first agenda item, so I'll talk about that in a minute. Urbana Arts grants are due on January 10th, 2012 at 5 p.m. We had a commemorative dedication ceremony for the commemorative sign that was installed at the courthouse this Saturday at 11 a.m. Some people were able to attend. Alona and Pat both spoke. The marketing subcommittee has been distributing a list of Urbana-Champaign arts classes, which is also available online, and I brought some of those, which are at the back table over here, if some of you would like to take some and distribute them around. As far as the Martin Luther King Jr. Park project, that subcommittee and city staff met on November 29th and agreed to use an RFQ process to identify an artist to create a sculpture or other installation commemorating Dr. King's legacy in King Park. And this project will be funded by TIF 3, which expires in 2013. So Commissioner Waller and Commissioner Lewis and I have been working on that project. We held 3 grant workshops during November to provide information on the application process, and a total of 32 people combined attended those. The new episode of Art Now for December is an interview with artist Michael Schwegman. We've set the Art at the Market dates for 2012, which are listed. And there was a proposal for the Public Arts Coordinator to do additional music and performance programming at the market along with other duties that was presented last night, but that was not forwarded to City Council for approval, so that will continue to stay in committee the next time the Committee of the Whole meets, which will be in January. Rosalind Feynman Weinberg is our current artist of the corridor. Her drawings, prints, and paintings are on display through January 31st, so check them out if you haven't had a chance. And then finally, we have 405 Facebook fans and 135 Twitter followers, and an email newsletter was sent to 414 email subscribers on December 6th. And we've been working with Single Stereo Design on a promotional postcard and brochure for the Urbana Public Arts Program. And that's what we've got for our progress report.
Okay, very good, thank you. Next we move to old business, which the first thing would be a presentation by Jack Mackey on the Boneyard project.
So Mr. Mackey will be presenting the design he's been working on for public art in the Boneyard Creek Improvements Project. Most of you have seen sort of an initial concept design of this, and now it's a little further along, and Mr. Mackey has also brought some show and tell items, which you'll get a chance to see a little closer in a little bit. This design was presented to City Council last night, and there was some feedback. Diane Marlin on City Council had some questions about the durability of the tile, and we're getting information about that from the tile manufacturers, just because the Boneyard Creek does flood sometimes. And also Councilman Dennis Roberts had some questions about the overall design aesthetic and concept, and so we've taken that feedback into account and we'll be taking a look at that. And Jack is here to present, and he'll also be at the public meeting following this. So following his presentation, you can ask questions or at the public meeting. So, Jack?
Good evening. Happy to be back.
Hi.
She's been keeping me busy.
I'm sure.
I'm not certain how's the best way to show you these things that I've brought with me, so we can sort of figure that I can lay these out, or shall we make it up as we go? Okay. All right. Things have been moving quickly. I want to start with this overview sheet of where the primary focus is of the work that I'm doing that is consistent with what you saw previously. The red areas are the walls that I'm working. And then down on this inside area, let me see if I can find the mouse. Then down along this inside area is where the diatoms, you remember that we discussed previously, will be sited. And they're in that stone, which is the type of stone we're going to be using, the color. With that, we decided on that this morning, is an example, a first pass at what the images will look like. The texture of the stone is going to be different, but we'll get to that one. So on each of these walls, and we'll walk them through, do each of you have a sheet? Okay, so that we can walk through these. Clicking forward, remembering one of the places that I started was looking at the smaller components of the structure of the Boneyard Creek, of what it is that makes the stuff work, why the creek, how woodland creeks in the prairie work. And one of the plants I found was this common sedge plant. It's like this is the common cold. This is the common plant. This is the plant that all woodland creeks share in common. And it's not a big sexy flowering thing, but it's a backbone structure. So working with that, we then moved. Let me see what's here. So then moved into developing a form liner using, and I brought with me, although the paint is flaking off, samples of this material. Maybe what I could do is lay this out here very quickly, and you'll see. What I was thinking is you'll be able to see how the form fits together. I tried to spray paint it gray, so it would be more the color of concrete, so that you get a sense of how that striation works. And this is the texture that would be abutting it. So this is, and the way that they cut them is better than the way that I cut it. So those are the way, as you move around and move through the park, the way that the light moves off of the striation. Sometimes it'll read flat, sometimes it'll read very, very granular. So this was the 5 foot big piece that we would make using this material. And then that rolls over into an 8x8 panel that will be used to make the form liners for many of the walls. The springtail, for those of you who don't recall, is from what I can determine, the dirt farmer of dirt farmers. It's a plant that works, it's an animal that works a very, very important combination between living plant, fungus, rotting plant, and living plant. And to get a sense of the size of these guys, in any cubic foot of topsoil in the prairie, there are 10,000. So figure out the cubic space in here times 10,000 to get a sense of them. So these are really a foundation animal in the area. So I looked at this, started working with it, and developed a maquette. I made the maquette up, and working with. There's one guy at the U of I that this is all he does is springtails, and he said you got to get the segments right and make sure you get the segments right. So I've been working to abstract this, to build it into something. If you wanted to send those photos around, I made a small piece. I was arguing with the Formline company, and we want this on the walls that we use to be just a background, kind of a mottled gray on the walls until you get right up to it and you'll see what they are. So I was arguing with them, And they said, it's too small, we can't do it. And I said, yes, maybe you can. So I made one for them and cut it out of foam core, which you see on the right side here. You can see the ruler down the side to get a sense of scale, and sent it to them. And they made a casting, which is coming around. And it does work. So this is the piece we'd be using. And when laid up together in wallpaper fashion, it starts to read as such. You see the 5 foot by 10 foot segment on the side. And then you see how panels on the left-hand side, how panels fit together. So it does work as wallpaper. And given the different sizes of the walls, there are numerous ways that this panel can be cut and still match in to make a flow that won't show a big, heavy joint. So here's a detail of one of the walls, and as I say, looking past to it, it's going to read as a gray mottled condition. But then when you get up close, there'll be these, and the size of the legs and the springtail piece coming down from the last joint, just about the size for a kid to run their finger through, to feel that and to trace through them on the wall. I would expect that people might even be coming out doing rubbings of these. So that's one liner that we're working with. The other, going back to the sedge seed, on the larger structural walls, we're using that as a much stronger, bolder form. This drawing is a little misleading in that it shows it in far too much contrast than there will actually be. But we're looking at one wall here, wall number 2, wall 2, which on the lower left side here is where water comes in at Grigg Street. So there's creek flowing across the bottom here. Rising up out of this is a place to really play up the common sedge. So we're looking at using a tile, and I'm still working on one color. Not quite sure of one color. Well, not quite sure of actually 2 colors. But here's the color chart that I'm working with right now. While this is called mango, Christina and I disagree. This is not mango. This is something else, but it's not mango. So I'm looking for a brighter red, but still something that stays in the family of color that comes from the plant. But these two are working very closely with it. So these clusters, the way that the seed pod forms is in very geometric fashion. So we can take these 2x2 tiles and lay them in this way. These will be inlaid into the wall. The tall green strips are the glass that you see down below here. And the gray pieces are just a reveal. Just a 3/8 inch drop line in the wall, so it'll just be shadow. Working the curves in the glass or in the tile would become extremely expensive. So I think that we can just use a gray, just let shadow do the work there, and let these other pieces be very much stronger and striking. I spoke with a tile fabricator today about this joint right here. And this joint right here, and he said, no, just a little bit of work. We can chip those and cut those and make that angle work very well. But I want to stay away from a lot of hand work up on the wall. These are 3 of the walls that we're looking at to handle the big tall wall. This is the middle one here is the railroad bridge. This is the bridge with the railroad on it. There's a fence up at the top of it. We're still working on what that will be. And then on the other side of it, wall number 14, there's a piece here that bends and shifts. But just giving you a sense of the size and the scale of this. This wall up here is going to be one that appears this time of year. There'll be a lot of plant material in front of it and a lot of leaves on trees in front of it. But at this time of year, when all of that dies down and the leaves drop off, this wall will stand forward. So working very carefully on how seasonal approach happens. To orient you, right over here where the cursor is the Station Theater. And this is a path that curls down, ADA access path that rolls down, around, and through. And Race Street is right here. And there's a path that comes in here, turns down and down a set of steps, then down to the creek. Right through this area up in here is a place where you'll be right up to the springtail liner, that very close, tight detail. And then a metal green screen wall out in the center. So these walls work in two different ways. The big structural walls are the large sedge seed image. The ones where people are close up to are the finer grain of the wall. Wall number 19, which is the Broadway Bridge running behind us here, is on the east end of the park, and it's not going to be rebuilt. The team is still struggling a bit with what to do with it. You can't just say, okay, we're done, here it is. All we know now is it's going to be cleaned, probably sandblasted. There's been discussion of panelizing limestone and placing it on there, but I don't think that's going to be affordable. So one of the things we're looking at is to not treat it like a Jackson Pollock painting and have to touch every square inch, but to treat it very carefully with some of these strips of color. And with this being a west-facing wall, as you come up out of the creek in the afternoon and start to turn towards Broadway with the sun coming in over your shoulder and that glass bouncing all the light back, it'll really electrify that. There are costs that are associated with the install of this. We need to, because it's sitting proud on the wall, we need to catch the edges. I've talked with fabricators and said, well, we don't want that 16-year-old kid that I was up on top of the bridge with my pocket knife trying to pop one of those out. So we're going to use an epoxy bond, which will work well with the freeze thaw, not a water-based mastic, but an epoxy bond that will anchor this stuff to the wall. It's something we're still looking at. As I said, the team has not reached a full decision yet on what that will be, but this is what we're bringing forward to the conversation. We all remember Christina's boots. This has really taken a hold. A lot of people are quite taken their fancy as to work with these pieces. The diatoms, again, are amazing. They're an amazing structure, and these are the critters that regulate the silica in the water, that they capture and regulate it, and it becomes their shell form, and they're quite amazing. You start to look at them. So as we talked about before, what we want to do is enlarge those, bring them up in scale and run them right along the edge of the creek, right down at the bottom. And this is a first pass at just a small part. And I wanted to see what kind of detail they'd be able to get with it. And I'm quite amazed. So they're able to get this really wonderful detail. The stone is going to have a texture a little bit rougher than this. So we're going to do another test to make sure that it holds itself under that texture. But I think these are going to be quite wonderful. Right now we're carrying a cost of about 20 of them. And again, these are down inside the area. When you're down in the park, you're 14 feet below Race Street, out of traffic, in this area, and it'll be things you find along the creekway. Everyone gets great big. These remind me of the Halloween candy lips that you get. This is one that I found. So just to get a sense of the size, we'll pull this up to 28 feet. What I do is you take the image up above and then just turn it into a black and white, and then you see how that's sandblasted in. And this is a piece, this piece represents a quarter of this one, of this image. I think that's my last picture, yep. Color discussion, I'm still trying to try to find a better red for these. Should I shoot these around? These are the primaries that I'm working with right now. Again, I don't think that's mango by a long shot. Here's the color palette that they give you to select from, and then you can't tell until you get the actual one. So I spoke with the folks, and they're sending me 2 more of the pieces. This is really tough, durable material. I've used it in a lot of paving. It has a 46% recycled clay content to it. The glass is, what did we find out? It's
56.
56% recycled glass. So although there aren't lead, there's no lead association with landscape projects yet, or these kinds of projects. We're trying to make as great opportunities as we can of that. Any questions at this point? Thoughts?
Can you say a little something about the durability of the sandblasted stone that has the diatoms in it?
This is very tough stone, and it is selected and used on building faces and in public areas for its durability. We're cutting it. The face along the creek will be cut in such a way that it's a texture that's not almost as unlike the roughness of the carpet, to be able to provide a non-slip. The blast, even though it's very detailed, is going to hold. It's going to hold up over a long period of time. If there was going to be blowout and loss, it would have happened while this was being sandblasted. If those pieces were going to break away, they would have broken away during the blasting. What I expect is going to happen is that they're going to be at creek edge, and the water's going to rise, and with the water rise, it's going to come, stuff is going to float in and settle in, and it's going to show them, and then it's going to rain and wash away and not show them. So they're going to come and go. And I need to be careful to not turn this into a science fair project. But, and it's a question that came up at council last night, since a lot of this is based on, all of the work is based on the science, if you will, of the creek edge and the creek way. We need to provide access to that information for those who want to follow it out a little bit farther, who want to know, is that a shrimp, or is it a termite, or is it a what? What do they put on the wall? So there are 3 ways that we can do that. One, the analogy that I use in this is that it's not unlike you find in National Geographic. You find the photograph, which catches your interest, and then there's a small piece that describes what the photograph is, and that will be a small plaque or plaques that we'll find that we can etch into a small stainless steel piece that will say what it is. It'll show an image and then a brief description of what it is. On that plaque will also be a phone number. And on that phone number, people will be able to, here I am dialing. I'm dialing. We'll date myself. I'm dialing on the diatom here in front of us. Be able to call into that and get a brief oral description of the work. There will also be a QR code piece so that those walking around with smartphones will be able to point the smartphone at it, and that will link into a city link, and from that, go to links about the entirety of the creek, the city's projects about the creek, the Arts Commission work that this body is doing. It could link to specific links about the animals, the critters, the plant, the diatoms. So once into that link, it's endless at that point. So we will be providing the information. So if someone is curious to find out, there are avenues of deeper and deeper that we'll provide. The stone will hold this well. It will hold the images. Once we cut them in, it's going to be there. The stone will change in color, and there was conversation last night about the bathtub ring, the boneyard bathtub ring. If you go along the creek now and you look at the walls, you see where the high water mark is. And to some of us, that's a very intriguing story. And this morning in a conversation with the stone company and the landscape architects, we actually talked about maybe in their stone walls that we change at that high mark, we change the nature of that stone and mark it so that we work with that. But the stone that is constantly underwater or is touched by water is porous, and it will accept it will accept a stain change. So it'll color as, and I think the best thing to do, if you're curious about this, although it's a different color stone, it's the same type of stone, is to go through the Champagne area. It's a different color stone, but it's the same limestone, and you can see what discoloration means.
This is a sort of artwork that you put together. What's your ownership of this? Is there any ownership of the images, the designs, things like that?
There are two ways. There are two answers to your question. The first is how it's built, which describes to federal copyright law what can be copywritten and what cannot. It will all be built by a general contractor. We don't see any need for me to carry any specific piece of it. I had thought maybe it would be valuable for me to carry just the tile component to subcontract that, but I think it's going to be messier to do that. So everything will be constructed from contract drawings by the general contractor and subs that Christina and I will approve. We're going to write a spec that we get to say if they're qualified or not. What that means to copyright law is it is part of the architectural whole. And there's nothing here that I can copyright. The images that I will be using are derivative works. It's a derivative of a previous owned, and I doubt that is copywritten at this point, as it is common. It's part of the public realm. These images that I'm using, the images of the leaf form, the leaf form. And the leaf form would be copyrightable. I don't know if it's, do we or don't we? I mean, the city will own it. The city will have the rights to use it, to promote the city in any way that it sees fit. I try to figure out, okay, what would Nike do with it? What would Nordstrom do with it? What would Starbucks do with it? What would a third party do? So I don't know. I mean, I think Christina and I ought to have a conversation about what components would we want to copyright.
You provide as a number of symbols, but when you get into it, you can't reproduce the alma mater or this or that, without a lot of permission.
Right.
If someone wanted to do T-shirts or commemorative whatever down the line, what would be the restrictions? Or what would be the safeguards we should erect, if any?
I am very familiar with copyright law. I've actually gone to the federal Supreme Court to protect a copyright of mine, and I secured it only by going to the Fed to do it. I think in this case, if you'd allow Christina and I to have conversations, your question, the one piece here that would be imageable, besides the diatoms, which are open and free, common public property at this point, would be something about the tile forms. I think there are things that we can put into a contract that will certainly protect the city, and certainly protect me if we need to. But let's look at that and really test it on a case by case. Overall, because again, it's part of the architectural whole, which is Andy Lester versus Batman and Warner Brothers. Can cite case law. I know it so damn well. It says that none of this is really copyrightable and held separately.
And that's something that we can work with city legal staff on as well, and have conversations with Jack to get all those issues figured out.
Copyright law, that's a lot of my time in it. I just would be, if I wanted to explore these symbols, or T-shirts or posters, whatever, I just want to make sure that we're not losing them to someone else, that we,
Yep.
dangers and opportunities.
Yeah, that's fair. But
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, let Christina and I explore that. I'm very sensitive to the issue. You are. I appreciate that. There's nothing that, the city has full rights to use it to promote the city in any of its ways.
And at the city council meeting, was that main concern the public discoloration of the stone, or were there bigger?
It was the concern about maintenance was related to with the flooding of the creek at certain times, how the tile would take that.
And I spoke with the tile distributor and Saks Tile, and I spoke with a tile installer this afternoon, and they're both they're quite convinced that yes, the stone and the concrete will stain, but the glass is not porous, and it will slide right off. The grout probably will, but the grout is such a small piece that the eye isn't going to be able to make that distinction.
I have a question about the surface areas that people will be walking on. How do you determine what materials to use so it's safer and more resistant when the weather changes to freezing? And
That was a 45-minute conversation this
Oh.
morning with the people from the quarry and the landscape architects and Foth engineers on the project. It will be what's called a bush-hammered texture. We need to be very sensitive. A bush-hammered texture is probably best described in a concrete finish as an exposed aggregate. It's much more than this texture.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hammered in, so that there's a lot of
Some grip.
resistance.
Oh, good.
There was a lot of discussion about that. That's a legal liability.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Sure. I would think not.
It's very important that I think artists understand and work and make sure that we meet all those
Mhm.
requirements. So,
Yeah.
looking very carefully at what that would be.
I imagine
The
so.
diatoms will add to the resistance and non-slip. So,
Yeah.
we're working on that side of the equation.
Thank you.
Are there any angles in which the reflection off the tile is going to be a distraction from traffic?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all, because they begin at the highest point they begin is at parapet height of the wall, which is 42 inches, but they're on the other side of traffic. There's not going to be any time that an automobile is going to get a glimpse of it. Which reminds me of one thing I did want to point out is two of the items that we've dropped since you saw it before and now is working the parapets. And the text in the risers that we had discussed. The risers, we just didn't find enough text that really resonated, that wasn't anything more than just a brush by. It wasn't just, it had to be something that you'd read it 50 times and it would still sing. So we let that pass. And the parapets, the cost of the Ray Street parapet to what we would get out of it wasn't enough give and take to really carry that forward. There have been other discussions in the last less than 24 hours about things that we might do at the heads of the paths as they rise up. See, how can I get back to this first map? Back to this first map, as the path over on the right-hand side up by Wall 19, as the path rises right here, there was discussion last night about some type of signage that might be right here, and then down in the lower left quadrant, right here where this comes up onto Ray Street, that there might be some notice that there's a park down here. It's 14 feet below you. And that was the thing about the parapets, is how do you know that there's a creek below? Well, within the last 24 hours, there's been conversation about using this stone, using a sandblast image of a diatom to pull that up onto the street. The signage budget should carry it entirely. There should be no cost associated with the art program. But there won't be any reflective nature. It's all inside. It's very inward looking, and the question from council was fair. It's very internal faced, and how do we say, down here is this wonderful thing happening for the people that are passing by up above.
Okay, I had one more issue I wanted to bring up, and this is something that Diane Marlin had mentioned about the springtails. We all know what those are because we've talked about them for some time, but she said that she had shown them to people, and some people thought they were termites or shrimp or something else. So I guess I kind of want to make sure that everybody here is comfortable with the fact that some people are going to see that and wonder, why did we put that up there? Granted, we will have an explanation there. We will have the information that Jack was talking about. But I just want to make sure everybody's feeling okay about that, or?
I certainly pay more attention when I walk since talking to you, knowing what's below my feet.
And as you're speaking, it makes me think that not only down inside the park we should place these plaques, but also in those areas where we were discussing at the edges. So we should have that kind of information up by Wall 19 at Broadway, at the bridge where people are coming in. This is what the stuff is, so that the people who pass by might one day look and see what it is. Oh, it's not a shrimp. It's this other. And also over at the pathway entry at Griggs and at Race, at that location. Also placing it, I think, down below in two places. I think maybe we want 4 of these pieces that will explain that. I mean, yeah, the springtail's it's an obscure hexapod.
Right.
And
It's not something everybody's going to know.
It's not the only bug in the dirt. It's just one that, when I started researching, it really started to think to me about the work that it does, and this odd shape. And then I talked to the biologist whose entire life that's what he does.
Right.
And he got all excited. So he knows what they are. So it's curious when we place those kinds of images out. Stories start to evolve around them in strange ways. I mean, it's one of the things that happens with artists, and what does it mean, and how does it? I'm happy that that someone takes enough interest and starts to argue, debate in their brain, what is it, and they start asking themselves, what is it? Maybe they follow it out. But yeah, you'll hear, did you see the shrimp that they put in? Yeah, well, they're freshwater shrimp did you know that there are freshwater shrimp in the creek? Believe me, that story's going to come.
Right, and obviously it's not traditionally beautiful, but it's interesting, and it's something to do with that particular location.
It is, and the way that I've tried to work that, in the way that it shapes and formats itself as kind of a wallpaper. It's a very pattern-based, quilted, stitched. It's stitch work. It's quilted stitch work, and that's in some ways what we have to do with the concrete, is treat it like a patchwork quilt. Patch these pieces together to make interesting and intriguing pattern.
Anybody have any comments?
Well, I kind of like it. It's there's a sort of message that if you pay more attention to the small things, that the large things will find their way just fine. And certainly springtails. I mean, the bend in the front was a little problematic for me, but I guess that's so that it'll fit in better. Is that a pretty natural? The bunny ears part.
Oh, the bunny ears part. Let me back up. Let's back up to the critter. I pulled those back so that the shape would be
more of an arc,
an S shape that then folds into the next one. So it's a series of S forms that move across the wall. Okay. What I noticed is that I have one too many bends in the bunny ears, and what I want to do is I need to take out one of the. As you see that there's in the lower section there's this joint, and then there's this piece of the antenna that move out. I want to reduce those in the mold. I want to take those down to just line work, the same as. I want want to have to take these bunny ears down to the density of the tail, so that it's that, then through the segmented body, then these pieces rolling back. Actually, I want to pull this ear back to here, and pull this one back down in, so it really accentuates. So I'm taking some liberties with the critter, but the scientist said, you got to get the right number of segments, which, we're maintaining.
Okay, Ginny, did you want to say anything, or?
Well, I was just going to say, since part of our mission is education,
Mhm.
I think that this is a great idea. I can see all kinds of fun marketing stuff. Do you know what a springtail is? You know, how many do we have in Urbana and that sort of thing? I can see
Okay.
this being kind of fun promotion.
Contests and things, yeah.
Okay.
Does the city
Good.
have an official hexapod?
We will.
Jeff, did you want to say something?
But this all raises the issue that all of this discussion that we've had started with something at the public input that said, let's have some earthy colors. We've gone a long way from that. And if you don't document your thought processes, it's going to be left to somebody else to figure out how you got to a springtail. Part of the record should be, well, this is what I was trying to do, and I talked to scientists and things like that, rather than just, this is a springtail, I think.
And we do have, in the things that Jack has submitted to us, narrative about, all the scientists he interviewed and who he spoke to and his whole process in getting to these designs.
Well,
So-
originally we were talking about, because my son emailed me from London once, and he goes, I was in class and they told me that champagne soil is the gold standard around the world. I didn't know this. Turns out it is, and so our soil is very well known. Well, this little critter, it's not just a boneyard thing,
Yeah.
So we need to connect those things so people realize this wasn't just a cute image that he thought up. But
I think he should be on your show. He would be, discussing
that would be
this,
that would be a cool
You could
Sure.
have several segments.
We can do that. I don't know how many people are watching my show, but
Well,
he's
but it would be
welcome
for
to do
archival
that.
purposes as well, then, actually
Sure.
having him talking about
Sure,
it.
that's not a bad
would be
idea.
Feed into the website
Okay,
footage.
sure.
In those three steps of the educational, the information links that we'll provide, it'd be difficult to do that in the small piece. The second link of being able to phone in to get that can be worked into a narrative. Those phone links are being used by numerous arts. Are you doing that now with some people? It's being used by numerous arts commissions to hear from the artist, and they range from a minute to a couple of minutes. How long does someone want to stand and listen? But that information can be built in there. But I think you're absolutely right. This is not just something that I said, oh, that's cute, let's play with this.
Well, we need something in the library. When we go back to the library and look for why it's called the Boneyard, there's all sorts of things out there. You should be part of that record.
We'll cover that trail, yeah.
Okay, anybody have any other comments? I think that's it, and thanks very much, Jack.
Great. I don't know how to jot this down. So.
Okay. And
Let
then
me
I know you
collect
wanted
up
to
my
do
stuff.
a little bit of work on the long-range planning exercise.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, this is almost more of an update, but at our last meeting, just to sum up the memo that I gave you, Commissioner Winkelmeis suggested that each subcommittee get together and consider some long-range goals and set those up as far as short, mid, and long-term goals. So most of our subcommittees have met. A couple didn't have a chance to fill out that worksheet yet. But I have included all of their answers within your packet, as well as the worksheet. And I also compiled a lot of the goals together so that we have the short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals from each subcommittee. I also went through and just made a chart to see how each of those subcommittees were addressing the ideas and key values that were brainstormed at the October 11th meeting, and then how these subcommittees' goals were addressing the duties of the Public Arts Commission that are outlined in the ordinance. And just a note on that, there are a couple where nobody is addressing any of the ordinance duties, 8, 14, and 15. And if you look back at those ones have to do with recommending updates to the public arts ordinance, taking such other actions as the mayor and city council direct from time to time, and overseeing administration, receipt, purchase, maintenance, dispossession, and deaccession of works of art to be placed on municipal property. So it's not like we're not currently addressing all of these duties. So at this point, aside from getting the subcommittees that haven't met together, the staff recommendation is to use all of this information to start drafting a initial draft of a long-term plan. And so if the commission would like to discuss what could be included in that, some things I included in the recommendation would be the mission statement, the key values and ideas list that we originally came up with at the October meeting, the duties in the ordinance, and then the long-term goals by the timeline that was set up. So if there are other things that you think should be included in that document, it would be good to let me know, and it would be good to have some direction on how to proceed, whether to go ahead with creating that draft or what.
I don't know. Do we need any other information except perhaps the names of the people who are presently on the subcommittees? Or?
I can go through that if you'd like.
Oh, no, it was just, should that be included in the document
yeah,
you're talking about?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I should mention that our new commissioner, Greg Chu, has joined the Art Now production subcommittee, so he'll be helping Pat with the creation of that show, and also has asked to join the Royer Arts and Architecture subcommittee. So that one has not yet met to fill out the worksheet, but we'll be working to get together to do that.
Okay. I don't know. Do you need actually anything else from us? I mean, I think what you described sounded pretty good to me. Did anybody have any additional?
If that sounds good, then I'll go ahead and prepare that
go ahead
draft
and do
for the
that.
next meeting.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, then you can email me.
Okay. I think you have an announcement you wanted to make here?
Just that we have our Boneyard improvements public meeting following this meeting. That's over at the Urbana Civic Center, and we'll go from 6 to 8. Jack will be there, I'll be there, and also the landscape architects and the engineers for the whole project will be presenting about the whole project. So if you're interested in going over there and checking out the project, I encourage you to.
Okay. All right. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.